policies, we look at the environmental policies, because we live in a very integrated, complex world. And we need to understand when we talk about food and agriculture, we need to think about the subsistence of this planet. This is an existential question right now. So from that perspective, the topic that has been given to me is called the impact assessment in a changing context of agricultural development. It's a pretty big topic, and I don't think I can do justice in just 20 minutes. So what I'll do, what I have decided to do, is to talk about only 3 things. One, just to share broad overview of why you do the program evaluation, and then talk just a bit on changing context of agricultural development. Why is it changing? What are the drivers? What are the emerging challenges? And then talk about some key points to reflect on. So those are the 3 things. So let me move. So what are the fundamentals of impact evaluation? I see that in a way, it is what. So what? What is why program evaluation? How do we do it? And that's what you have done last 10 days. How to conduct an impact evaluation based on the available techniques, statistics, science, and meta-analysis. So that's what your training is about. But we have to go beyond that. If we talk about the changing context of agriculture, we need to think about, it's not just the results. We have to review the results. We need to understand the context of the results. We need to understand the robustness of the results. So that is what A is for. And T, I think that's the most important part of it. That is the theory and triangulation. This will be critically important moving forward as society as a whole is changing rapidly with many more new challenges, even though we're living in a much more comfortable life than ever before in the history. Okay, so keep this framework in mind. Ask the question, what? Why program evaluation? So there can be a number of answers. I chose just 3 answers. One of them is because I have been assigned through my institution or for my PhD to do so. So that's the right answer, actually. But does it really reflect the reality? Possibly not. Does it give you the sense why you do it? Possibly not. And the second point is, understand if the program is generating benefits. That is also true. That's the right answer. But the question is, do we need to go beyond that? That's the question you have to keep in the back of your mind when you think about impact evaluation. And the third one I put there is called take action for course correction. So now think about it. 3 responses to my question, why program evaluation? And if you take the first letter of these 3 answers, that tells you B-U-T, but. So that means you still have questions. You'll come up with more questions. And that's what should take us to the next one. These are all right answers, but do not capture the significance, entire significance of the impact evaluation. I'll try to come back to this point later, but just keep that in the back of your mind. So how do we conduct impact evaluation? I hear colleagues say, Osman said that, Babita said that, Rohini said that, we have learned about meta-analysis, we have learned about qualitative analysis. So I put that in first fundamental component. That is the descriptive analytics. So in our professional jargon, we call that process evaluation. And process evaluation is a fundamental part of your evaluation. I'm not saying that econometrics is less important. I'm not saying that RCT is less important, but understanding context is absolutely necessary when you conduct impact evaluation, whether for your institute or for your dissertation research or for your own publication. Try to think about the context carefully before you run those rigorous regression or randomized control trial when you design one of them. The second one is these randomized control trials. That has been there for many, many years in medical science. in the context of the vaccine. I'm sure you're hearing it all over in the news media. But in social science, in economics, actually that has taken off quite remarkably. And some of you might know Professor Abhijit Banerjee, Michael Kramer, and Esther Duflo got Nobel Prize for making their contribution, making RCT applicable in the context of analyzing policies and improving the programs. And the third one I put there is called the econometric method. Again, I heard all those terms: ID estimate, difference in difference, propensity score matching. These are all absolutely right. We all need them. One thing you have to keep in mind that these techniques and method evolved over time. So I'll give one specific example. These are broad methods to generate results, but they do not guarantee accuracy and robustness. So that's why you have to think about, even after you have applied the method, think about the results in a contextual framework in terms of the robustness of your methods, and more importantly, whether they are consistent with the existing knowledge of it. All right, let me move to the next one. So last one is the assessing accuracy of results. How do we do that? Best methods do not assure accuracy. And then best methods plus accurate results does not imply scalability or generalizability. What do I mean by that? So when we say best method, that has a time dimension. Best method for what time? As some of you know or heard in your lectures with your professors, impact evaluation, James Heckman's two-step method, who identified the problem of selection bias and how to address it, endogeneity problem, how to address it, that came out not too long ago. I started college in the 80s. And before that, what did you do? Evaluation was comparing mean, and that had a lot of problems. We know that. And then came back, all right, you do this quasi-experimental method and said, okay, that gets better, but not necessarily better. Then came up we'll go for this difference in difference, probability score matching, and then RCTs, all that evolved over time. So, but did we really capture every single time the right thing? This is a very important point to remember. I'll give you one example. Let's go back to 1960s and 70s. Our region was in a dire crisis, dependent on food aid. Agriculture was backward. And then came Green Revolution. So irrigation, fertilizer, technology, improved seed, revolutionized the agriculture sector. But when you looked at the outcome, it was given the name Green Revolution because it made such a significant difference. But did you get everything right? Possibly not. Irrigation, if you look at from the economic metrics, for example, increase in income, it did remarkably well. Farmers got better off, well-being improved. But we now realize that had a cost as well. It was not just the benefit, it also had some unintended consequences that we have to deal with this generation. Not only my generation, your generation, even generation after. We have to account for that. So what does that tell you? That tells you that we evolve over time. These results that we generate is based on the best available science and techniques at a given point in time. Now, let me say a little bit about the second point. This is very relevant in the context of the randomized controlled trials, which is taking over the entire empirical policy analysis world. Let me tell you why. RCT is a gold standard in a pure science, in medical science, pharmaceutical science. That has been the gold standard. And true, it has made big difference in our policy analysis too. But one thing we need to keep in mind all the time when we talk about it is that even if our results are accurate and right, that does not necessarily mean that we can scale up that program. The reason is these are context specific, these are location specific. In agricultural science, we have known for decades that what we get from an experimental station is not the same when it goes out to the farm. Beyond that, you have the issues of the agroecological diversity, changes in the soil quality, changes in the ecology, all of those. So if you do a pilot in one location, you cannot generalize it. It doesn't have an econometric term called the external validity of your results. So we have to keep that in mind. So I think this is the most important part of it. That's why I put it in a puzzle. These are fundamental. You need to have the theoretical consistency and you need to triangulate. I think that's very, very important. Again, go back to my point, given the level of knowledge. So you have to find that purpose when you're doing it. It's not just finishing few regression and say that, okay, well-being went up, income increased by 100%. That is not the end of it. But when you say that, think about it, because this is going to be changing in the future. Give me just a second. I have to move this a little bit. Okay, good. So I'll talk more about it. So the doing impact evaluation based on, I see someone is trying to get it. Okay, based on traditional outcome indicators and survey data will not be enough. I'm making a statement here. And the definition of benefits and costs of agricultural program will be different. I just gave you an example of the irrigation or the fertilizer use system. It was a panacea in the 60s. Fertilizer came in, land productivity went up, but now our science, the soil scientists are telling us that the soil quality is getting degraded. It has a cost. And we did not know about that unintended consequences. Those are the things that will become more and more important moving future in the context of the agricultural development, not only agricultural development, for the development of the society as a whole. I think that will become very important. So agricultural programs will be evaluated within a much more complex context. It will go far beyond increasing production. So in food policy field, we talk about food security, and we define that as availability, meaning increasing production, access, utilization, stability, all of that. So that whole context in the future is going to change. Maybe in your lifetime, you'll see that these contexts are changing. And your generation after you, will have to tackle those challenges moving future. Okay, now the changing context of agriculture. So let me say just a few words about it, and then I'll move. So this is an old graph. Unfortunately, it's in weekend, and I confirmed my presentation only yesterday and didn't have access to RAs. So I used an old graph. So what are these changing contexts we talk about? So look at this graph. This is dated graph. It says, what do you see there? Share of agriculture consistently declining well through 2015. And then industry is more or less stagnant. And then services sector taking up 59%. Now, latest data says, this is actually very atypical information. Indian agriculture share in economy has increased after the pandemic. It is now around 20% of the GDP, which means we have gone back to 2003-04. That's when the share of agriculture was 20%. It's again 20% following the pandemic. So there are reasons to be concerned. There are reasons to be excited too. Let me elaborate why. Reason to be concerned because in an economic transformation, you want agriculture to decline consistently over time. You don't want that to fluctuate. So that is from a broad economic transformation perspective. But from agricultural perspective, this is an exciting information. I am writing the chapter on South Asia for Global Food Policy Report for April. I just looked at these numbers. South Asian agriculture has shown remarkable resilience amid the pandemic. Almost all countries in South Asia, except Maldives, has registered positive growth rate in agriculture. India did actually better than previous years. So that is the reason to be excited, because agriculture and the food system in our part of the world is becoming resilient. But at the same time, we don't want that resilience when overall economy is going downhill. So let me say one more thing. This is in the context of economic transformation, in the context of agricultural development. So what do we know there? Just a second. Okay, so this is a graph. Oh, sorry, I missed it. Let me stay at India now. So what do you see there? The blue bars at the bottom, those are share of employment in agriculture in India, and it goes until 2020. So agriculture still is the largest employer and accounting for about 42% of the jobs, 42%. And share of GDP is 20%, and it came down to as low as 14, 15%. This is a real mismatch. So if those of you who have studied development theory, agriculture-led economic development or dual economy theory, you know that economic transformation process requires agricultural value going down, employment share going down, other sectors growing. So I give this example to everyone. In 1875, in the US, 75% of the workforce were employed in agriculture. Now it is less than 2%. So when you're looking at this economy right now, Indian, where you have share 42% employment, but GDP share is much lower, there is something as a community, a practice of the member of the institution, you will have to take on and work in the future. So this is the same kind of theme, but in a global context for the world as a whole. What you have there is share of employment in agriculture in the vertical axis, and the per capita real income, I think 2010 prices, on the horizontal axis. What do you see? When per capita income goes down, share of agriculture employment goes down as well. Now, if we go back to Indian case now, where is India? This is 42%, somewhere between that 25 and 50% where everything is clustered. When you think about changing agricultural development, this is the reality that we'll have to change in the future. So the development partners, policymakers, national thinkers, that's what they'll be worried about. That is the picture you want to change. If you cannot change, then basically we are failing in terms of ensuring improving the well-being of the people. Okay. So changing context of agriculture. So note this, first point that I make here under the plant, agriculture will remain significant no matter where we move as a society in the evolution process. Agriculture will remain significant, but less important for the economy and livelihood. This is a tricky balance. This is why we need to think about why we can maintain that significance. If you lose sight of it and pay more attention to the economic well-being, we might fall into a trap that can cause disasters for the future generation. Okay? The second point, agriculture, the way we know it, is going to change. Agriculture, the way I knew it in the 70s as a child, has changed. It's going to change even further in the future. So what might happen? So the second picture that I have is that agriculture is going to become part of a system. So some of you might have heard UN is doing a global event called the UN Food System Summit. Food cannot be considered alone. When we think about the agriculture, it should be a process. Process is starting from pre-production to the production, post-harvest, processing, marketing, consumption, disposal, and its impact on the planet. All of that needs to be taken together. So if you do an impact evaluation at the plan level, on a program level, that alone is not going to be enough. Moving forward, maybe all these mathematicians and the computer scientists will come up with method to integrate multiple dimensions of agriculture in the whole economy. I think that is going to be the challenge for your generation, maybe generation after you. So now I'm towards the end of it. So what are the key impact evaluation issues that you can ponder as you graduate today? And if some of you are finishing up your PhDs, will be entering into the professional life, whether it's teaching or doing research or being a company or the government employee, some of these will remain. The significance of the learning will remain. So what do we need then? So next time, my colleague, Dr. Anjani Kumar is there. I don't know if you have talked. Next program around, begin with a theory of change. I think that is going to be extremely important to understand, because theory of change is not going to be limited to agriculture. It's going to cross boundary of the sectors. So what will that theory of change have? That will have clearly delineated intended benefits and unintended consequences, harms to environment and human health. Why do I say human health here? When processing started in the industrialized world, in the OECD countries, it was a big win, because a lot of things that agriculture produced that used to go to waste can be processed now, and shelf life goes on. So that became part of the growth and multiplier and all of that. But now we realize that also it has caused several problems. So double burden of nutrition that we talk about right now, obesity, non-communicable diseases, all of that are happening. And not only that, we are also causing damage to our planet Earth. So in the future, when you move along, you have to think through that. So even the program design in the future will have to have a clear understanding of theory of change, okay? And always have to have the strategies for course correction. As I said before, we are never going to be perfect. We'll do the best given the level of knowledge, technology, and wisdom, of the stock of knowledge. But it's not going to be perfect. That's why we have to be open to making changes in policies. Policies that change relevance should need to be adjusted. But time and again, our research across the globe, we find that a lot of time policies are undertaken, but reform becomes extremely difficult. And that has a cost to your society. So that thing should be part of your theory of change as well, okay? So this is a picture of a simple theory of changes in the context of education, but I have picked it just to demonstrate. What do you have there? You have the input, activities, output, outcome, impact. There's a chronology of that. So when you think about the implementation stage, there are many activities and there are inputs to the process, and then that creates some output. So in this particular case, they are talking about education intervention. So if you give education, what will happen? So they'll get a better job. That's what eventually you want. There will be better income there, or they will get out of poverty and will be able to send their kids to school. So that's why you're doing this small intervention for the education intervention. But how do we get there? I think it's very important. When we look at it, I can give you an example from the Latin America. They became very famous. I think it was Ecuador or El Salvador, where they did this nutritional supplement in school. So their energy level went up, they are doing good in school, their income went up. But 40 years later, what have we learned? They're suffering from obesity, diabetes. So yes, for the time of the 60s and 70s, it did work. But beyond that, 50 years later, we see that there are challenges out of it, okay? This is also, I just picked up from online. This is some company called the Women Organizing for Change in Agriculture and Natural Resource Management. I chose this mainly because it has more details. It integrates many points: ecosystem, environment, community, institution, capacity, leadership. All of those elements are important. You can have a best designed program, but if you don't have the right institution, you are not going to see the impact. This is extremely important because when you're working, you are either doing PhD or in the system, ICAR system, and you want to make a difference. You can have the best ability to do the technique, but if an institution doesn't permit you to go out beyond the boundary and do things within, of course, outlined rules and regulations, then impact is not going to be desired. You might end up with negative impact even. So these are the things you need to keep in mind. I have 4 takeaways there. This is my last slide. I'll shut up after this. So impact evaluation is a process of understanding, making course corrections, and contribute to better evolution at program, sector, and societal level. We are here as a human being. We have a purpose. Purpose is to evolve. Society has to evolve over time. And unless you keep that mind open and make course correction and contribute to that entire evolutionary path at the sector and the societal level, then you'll be doing an exercise. Not that everyone will do it, but keeping it in mind will give you a purpose in what you do. So agriculture, the way you know it, is bound to change. Impact evaluation will have to account for those complex changes and other takeaways. And I have already stressed this point. Our evaluation will never be perfect, but we have to be, as scientists, we'll have to remain true to the fundamental objectives, purposes of impact evaluation, given the state of science, stock of knowledge, and best practices. Okay. I think this is my last slide. So I just wanted to thank you all. Thank you, Professor Alka Singh. Thank you, Dr. Anjani Kumar. And congratulations to all of you for successfully completing this program. From the IPRI side, on behalf of the IPRI's leadership, I assure you that we will remain engaged to bring IPRI's core competence to our partner institution. IPRI leadership greatly values the partnership between ICAR and IPRI in South Asia. And we want to go beyond. Actually, we want to make it more of a regional approach. During our recent meeting with Dr. T. Mahapatra, I actually pointed that out. Can we make it a hub where you can bring partners and the institutions from the other countries? And there, we bring in the state-of-the-art methods, knowledge, synthesis, and policy insight. And really last is this one. Happy holidays, everyone. Happy holidays.